Motion in your step.
Motivation in your heart.
Hello, and welcome to today's Motion and Motivation podcast.
We've put together a study guide for everyone. If you need it, you can grab it from the video description.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be tackling your source material on this idea of accelerated learning and how to optimize our brains. You've given us a pretty fascinating collection of excerpts from a book all about learning how to learn better. It really zooms in on the motivation and the right mindset and the methods we can use to unlock our potential. And it's packed with advice from all sorts of experts and researchers, even personal stories from the author's own journey to becoming a brain coach.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
So our mission today,
if we choose to accept it.
well, we've got to pull out the most useful techniques and concepts from all this material so that you listening to this can learn and remember information faster and more effectively. Think of it like we're handing you a cheat sheet for becoming a mental superhero.
I love that analogy, a cheat sheet for the brain.
Exactly. And one of the first things that really stood out to me from all this material was this idea of supervillains, these unseen forces that are holding us back from learning.
I see what you're getting at. It's like our brains are in this constant battle against these unseen forces that are limiting our potential.
Right.
And the book calls out three major villains: Digital Deluge, Digital Dementia, and Digital Deduction. And honestly, they're everywhere these days.
Okay, so let's unpack these villains one by one. Let's start with Digital Deluge. What is that exactly, and how is it impacting our ability to learn?
Well, think of it like this. It's that overwhelming flood of information that we're all facing every single day.
I know what you mean.
Social media, news alerts, emails. It just never stops.
Yeah, it feels like you're constantly being bombarded with stuff.
Exactly. And even back in the 90s, researchers were warning about the health risks of, being constantly connected. And today it's just gotten so much worse.
It's true.
So it's no wonder we feel stressed out and mentally exhausted. All that input can actually even impact our job satisfaction.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that feeling of just being overwhelmed with information. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. You just can't possibly take it all in. But how does this digital deluge connect to the second villain you mentioned, digital dementia?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. You see, we've become so reliant on technology, our smartphones, Google, that we're basically outsourcing our memory.
It's outsourcing our memory.
We don't even bother trying to remember things anymore because we know we can just look them up instantly.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
But the problem is, when we stop challenging our brains, those neural pathways that help us form memories, they actually start to weaken.
So basically, we're trading convenience for cognitive strength.
You got it.
Yeah.
We're letting those memory muscles atrophy.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about digital deduction? What's so villainous about that?
This one's all about critical thinking, or rather the lack of it. You see, it's not just about remembering facts. It's about using those facts to draw our own conclusions, to form our own opinions. But with algorithms feeding us prepackaged opinions and instant answers, we're losing that ability to think for ourselves. We're becoming passive consumers of information instead of active thinkers.
That is a scary thought. Like, we're letting the machines think for us. And I have to admit, I catch myself doing it sometimes too. Just scrolling through headlines, accepting recommendations without really digging deeper.
Right. We're all guilty of it to some extent. But here's the thing. Learning requires focus engagement and really deep processing of information.
Yeah.
And these digital villains, this deluge, the dementia, and the deduction, they're essentially sabotaging the very skills we need to learn effectively.
So if these digital villains are creating this shaky foundation for learning, what can we do to fight back? What can we do to build a stronger foundation? What's the antidote?
Well, that's where the book shifts gears. It goes from the problems to the solutions. And one of the most powerful antidotes it offers is something we all have access to, our mindset.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the power of mindset and how it can help us overcome these learning challenges.
Well, the book dives into this idea of fixed mindset versus growth mindset.
Okay.
So if you have a fixed mindset, you believe that your intelligence is basically set in stone. You're either born smart or you're not. And there's not much you can do to change it.
Right, and those beliefs can really feel like roadblocks,
Exactly.
preventing us from even trying.
It's like saying, I'm just not good at this, and giving up before you even start.
Yeah, point blank without giving yourself a chance to grow.
But a growth mindset flips the script. It says that intelligence is malleable, meaning you can always learn and grow no matter where you're starting from.
I like that.
It's about saying, I'm not good at this yet. It opens up possibilities and empowers you to embrace challenges.
It's like shifting from a feeling of being stuck to a feeling of constantly evolving.
Hmm.
And speaking of growth, one of the most inspiring examples from the book was the story of Nobel Prize winner Carol Greider.
Ah, yes. Carol Greider, she struggled with dyslexia as a child,
Wow.
which is a learning disorder that can make it really difficult to read and write. So imagine being told that you might not be able to learn effectively, and then going on to win a Nobel Prize in a field that requires intense reading and research.
That is incredible.
It's a perfect example of how our potential is not defined by our perceived limitations or setbacks.
That's a powerful reminder that we can achieve incredible things when we shift our mindset and embrace the possibility of growth. But even with the right mindset, we still need that spark to get us going right. We need motivation.
Absolutely. And the book dives into the core of motivation, arguing that it's not just about willpower or discipline.
But
It's about connecting our learning goals to something deeper, to our personal values and our why.
I can see that. We're far more likely to stick with something if it
Yeah.
genuinely matters to us, if it aligns with our core beliefs and aspirations.
Well, it's like having this driving force that
Yeah.
pushes us forward even when things get tough. And the book emphasizes the importance of having strong reasons for wanting to learn something. It even shares a personal story from the author about how he was declining social invitations. Because he was so deeply committed to finishing this book, his reasons for writing it were that powerful.
That's a great reminder that motivation isn't always about, feeling excited or pumped up. Sometimes it's about making those tough choices that align with our values even when they require sacrifice.
Exactly. And when you combine that unwavering commitment with a growth mindset, you're already well on your way to becoming a limitless learner.
Okay, so we've got the right mindset. We're fired up with motivation. What's next on this journey to unlocking our learning superpowers?
Well, just like any superhero, we need to fuel our brains properly.
Of course.
And this is where the book gets into the nitty-gritty of brain optimization, offering tons of practical strategies.
Right.
It takes a holistic approach, looking at everything from diet and exercise to sleep and stress management, because it all plays a role.
It's like creating a lifestyle that supports optimal cognitive function. And I have to say, those brain food recipes in the book sound pretty tempting. That cocoa cinnamon ginger hot chocolate caught my eye. Delicious and brain boosting. Sign me up.
Right. But even more than just tasty treats, the book really emphasizes the importance of sleep. It even calls it a laundry cycle for the brain,
A laundry cycle.
explaining how sleep helps remove toxins and consolidate memories.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The book cites research showing that our brains are incredibly active while we sleep, like a cleaning crew working the night shift.
That's right. Neuroscientist Jeff Iliff even describes it as a dishwasher for the brain in his TED Talk. Sleep essentially cleanses our brains each night, removing waste products, so we can wake up refreshed and ready to learn.
Wow, that's a great visual. So if we're not getting enough sleep, it's like we're letting our brains marinate in their own garbage, which obviously isn't good for learning.
Yeah.
Or anything else, really.
You got it. And that lack of sleep can lead to all sorts of problems. Poor focus, foggy memory, increased stress, irritability. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach. You're just not going to perform at your best.
So prioritizing sleep isn't just about feeling rested. It's about setting ourselves up for optimal brain function and learning. But let's be realistic, we all have busy lives, and sometimes sleep gets pushed aside. So what are some practical ways we can make sure we're giving our brains the rest they need?
Well, it starts with consistency. Our bodies thrive on routine, and that includes our sleep cycles.
Okay.
Going to bed and waking up around the same time each day can actually improve the quality of your sleep.
It's like setting an internal alarm clock for your sleep-wake cycle.
Exactly. The book also suggests creating a relaxing bedtime routine to signal to your body that it's time to wind down.
I like that.
This could include things like taking a warm bath, reading a book, or listening to calming music.
And avoiding screens for at least an hour before bed, right?
Yeah,
I know that blue light can really mess with our sleep.
absolutely. The blue light emitted from our devices can actually suppress melatonin production, which is the hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle.
Yeah.
So putting those devices away and dimming the lights can make a big difference in how quickly and deeply you fall asleep.
Okay, so we've tackled mindset, motivation, and now sleep. All crucial elements for becoming a limitless learner. But even with all the right ingredients, sometimes getting started can feel overwhelming. How do we actually translate all this knowledge into action and make lasting changes?
That's where the concept of habit formation comes in. The book emphasizes that change doesn't happen overnight. It's about taking small, simple steps, which it cleverly calls S3, to create new habits and break old ones.
I love that. It's so much more approachable than trying to overhaul your entire life all at once.
Yeah.
Small steps feel manageable, like something we can actually stick with.
Exactly. And the book introduces this fascinating psychological principle called the Zeigarnik effect, which can help us make those small steps even more effective.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about the Zeigarnik effect and how it can help us form new habits.
Essentially, the Zeigarnik effect says that unfinished tasks create mental tension that can actually motivate us to take action.
Okay.
Think about it. Have you ever started a project but didn't quite finish it?
Oh yeah, all the time.
And you have that nagging feeling of like, oh, I need to get back to that. Well, that's the Zeigarnik effect in action.
So it's like an itch we need to scratch, a mental loop we need to close.
Exactly. And the book suggests that we can use this to our advantage when forming new habits.
Oh, how so?
Instead of trying to change everything at once,
Sure.
we can break down our goals into small, manageable steps.
Okay.
And each unfinished step creates that mental tension that propels us forward to complete the next step and so on.
I see how that would work. It's like climbing a mountain. You wouldn't try to leap to the top in one giant bound.
Right.
You'd focus on taking one step at a time, knowing that each step brings you closer to your destination.
That's a great analogy. And the book shares an inspiring story about a client named Zheng who used this principle to overcome some serious challenges.
Okay, tell me about Shang. What stood out to you about his story?
Well, Yang was struggling with schizophrenia and depression and had spent a lot of time in and out of psychiatric wards.
Wow.
But he discovered the power of these small, simple steps and started making tiny changes to his daily routine.
Like what?
Things like brushing his teeth with his opposite hand or taking a short walk each morning.
Sounds simple enough. But did those small changes actually make a difference?
They did. By focusing on these manageable actions, he started to build momentum and a sense of accomplishment. And as he stacked one small win on top of another, he gradually gained control over his mental health and made incredible progress in his recovery.
That's really powerful. It shows that even the smallest actions can have a significant impact when we commit to consistency and leverage the power of that Zeigarnik effect.
Right. It reminds me of that saying, how to eat an elephant. One bite at a time. Big changes happen one small step at a time.
So if our listeners are feeling overwhelmed by a particular learning goal, what's one concrete action step they can take today?
I'd say identify one small, simple step that will move you towards your goal. And make sure it's something you can do right now today.
Okay.
Maybe it's reading for 10 minutes before bed, watching a short educational video, or even just committing to learning one new vocabulary word.
It's about setting that snowball in motion, knowing that it will gather momentum as it rolls along.
Exactly. And once you start seeing those small wins, you'll be amazed at how motivating they can be. It creates this positive feedback loop that just keeps you going.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of mindset, motivation, sleep, and building good habits. What else does this book have in store for us on our journey to becoming limitless learners?
Well, one of the most intriguing concepts it explores is this idea of flow state, that elusive mental sweet spot, where we're completely absorbed in a task and performing at our peak. It's like being in the zone.
Ah, yes, flow state. That feeling of being totally immersed in an activity, where time seems to fly by, and you're effortlessly producing your best work. It's almost like a superpower. But how do we actually get there? It feels a bit mystical and out of reach sometimes.
Well, psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's considered the leading expert on flow, he identified 8 key characteristics of this state.
8. Okay, give me the rundown.
All right, so there's intense concentration, clear goals, a distorted sense of time, effortless action, immediate feedback, a balance between challenge and skill, a feeling of control, and a loss of self-consciousness.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. But it sounds like all of your mental faculties are perfectly aligned, working in perfect harmony, like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. And while it might seem like a rare and fleeting experience, the good news is that we can actually train our minds to achieve flow state more often.
Okay, I'm definitely interested in learning more about that.
Right.
What are some practical tips for tapping into this flow state and experiencing that peak performance more regularly?
Well, the book emphasizes that eliminating distractions is crucial. Flow requires deep focus, so it's essential to create an environment that minimizes interruptions.
Right.
That means silencing your phone, closing unnecessary tabs on your computer, and finding a quiet space where you can fully immerse yourself in the task at hand.
It's like creating a mental sanctuary, free from the noise and chaos of the outside world.
Exactly. Another important factor is having a clear purpose for the task you're engaging in.
Yeah.
Flow state is more likely to occur when we're working on something that feels meaningful, something that aligns with our values and goals.
So it's not just about arbitrarily choosing any task. It's about selecting something that sparks our curiosity, ignites our passion,
Mm.
or contributes to a larger purpose.
Right, and this ties into another key element of flow, finding that sweet spot between challenge and skill.
Okay.
If the task is too easy, we'll get bored. If it's too difficult, we'll get frustrated and give up. But when we're engaged in something that stretches our abilities just enough, that's when flow state becomes much more accessible.
It's like finding the Goldilocks zone of mental engagement. Not too hard, not too soft, but just right.
Exactly.
But even if we find that perfect balance of challenge and skill, how do we stay motivated and prevent our minds from wandering?
Well, setting clear goals and breaking them down into smaller steps can be incredibly helpful. It creates a sense of structure and direction that keeps us focused and moving forward.
Right.
It's like having a roadmap for our mental journey, even if we allow for detours and unexpected discoveries along the way.
I like that. It's about having a destination in mind,
Mm-hmm.
but also enjoying the journey itself.
Precisely. And as we make progress towards our goals, we receive feedback. That helps to fuel our motivation and keep us engaged. That feedback loop is an essential part of maintaining flow state.
So it's a combination of intrinsic motivation, the joy and satisfaction of the activity itself, and extrinsic motivation, the sense of accomplishment and progress we feel as we achieve our goals.
Exactly. And as we become more skilled at a particular activity, we can set more challenging goals, pushing ourselves to new levels of performance. It creates a virtuous cycle of growth and mastery.
Flow state truly sounds like the ultimate brain hack. But what about those days when we're feeling less than inspired? Can we still achieve flow even when our motivation is low?
That's a great question. And the book acknowledges that we're not always going to be operating at peak performance, and that's okay.
Right.
But even when we're not feeling particularly inspired, we can still take steps to create the conditions that make flow state more likely to occur.
So it's about building a foundation of good habits, like minimizing distractions, setting clear goals,
Mhm.
and finding that balance between challenge and skill so that flow state becomes a more accessible and frequent experience.
Exactly. It's like creating a fertile mental landscape where
Well,
flow state can flourish more naturally.
I love that analogy. But let's say we've prepped the soil, so to speak, but we're still feeling a bit stuck. What's one practical tip for nudging ourselves toward that flow state, even when motivation is lagging?
One technique I find particularly helpful is called time boxing. It's basically setting a timer for a specific amount of time and committing to focusing on a single task during that period. No distractions allowed.
So if I'm struggling to get started on a writing project, I could set a timer for 25 minutes and just focus on writing for that block of time, ignoring email, social media, and everything else.
Exactly. And by creating that artificial constraint, you're essentially forcing yourself into a state of focus. And what often happens is that once you overcome that initial inertia, you naturally slip into a flow state.
It's like tricking your brain into being productive.
Yeah.
I like it. But even if we manage to achieve flow state, there's another crucial element to becoming a limitless learner, right?
You're right. We need to talk about focus. It's the foundation upon which flow state is built.
It makes sense. You can't really have one without the other. They seem deeply intertwined.
Precisely. Focus is the ability to intentionally direct our attention and resist distractions.
Right?
And it's a skill that's becoming increasingly challenging in our hyper-connected world.
Yeah, no kidding.
The book actually delves into the neuroscience of focus, explaining how those distractions are impacting our brain function,
Oh, really?
and thankfully offering strategies for sharpening our concentration skills.
The book claims that distractions are actually changing our brains.
That's what the research suggests. Studies have shown that people who are constantly multitasking have a smaller anterior cingulate cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for focus and attention.
Wow.
It's like our brains are being rewired by the constant bombardment of information and stimulation.
That's a scary thought. It's like we're trading our long-term cognitive health for that instant gratification of checking our phones or jumping between tasks.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. But the good news is that our brains are remarkably adaptable, and we can retrain ourselves to be more focused. And the book provides some really effective strategies for improving concentration,
Oh, like what?
like creating a distraction-free environment, practicing mindfulness techniques, and even scheduling time for distractions.
Wait, scheduling time for distractions. How does that work? It seems counterintuitive.
It might sound strange, but it's actually quite effective.
Hmm.
By acknowledging our tendency to get distracted and intentionally setting aside time for those distractions, we're actually less likely to succumb to them when we need to focus.
So it's like giving our brains a designated worry time, so they don't interrupt us during work or study time. I can see the logic there.
Exactly. If you're constantly getting sidetracked by emails or social media,
Mm-hmm.
set aside 30 minutes in the afternoon to check those things. Knowing you have that designated time can actually make it easier to resist those distractions during the rest of the day.
It's like training your brain to stay on task and resist the temptation to wander off into that digital wilderness. But what about distractions that are harder to control,
Yeah.
like internal worries or anxieties? How do we manage those?
Well, instead of trying to suppress those thoughts and feelings, the book recommends addressing the underlying issues head on. Techniques like journaling meditation or even talking to a therapist can help us process those difficult emotions and prevent them from hijacking our focus.
It's like clearing out the mental clutter so we can create space for what's truly important.
Exactly. But even with the best intentions and strategies, there are going to be times when we simply can't shake those distractions. What do we do then?
Yeah, sometimes those distractions feel relentless, like they're pulling us in a million different directions.
Well, one technique the book recommends is called attention switching. It's about deliberately shifting your focus from one task to another, especially when you feel your attention waning.
So if I'm working on a project and find myself getting sidetracked by thoughts about an upcoming deadline, I could intentionally shift my attention to a different aspect of the project, or take a short break to do something completely different, like going for a walk or listening to music.
Exactly. And by practicing this technique, we can strengthen our mental agility and become more adept at managing our attention, even when distractions are vying for our attention.
It's like building mental muscles for focus. We've covered a lot of ground here, from those supervillains of learning to the power of mindset, motivation, habit formation, flow state, and focus. It's like we've assembled a whole toolkit for becoming mental superheroes. But there's one more essential element we haven't talked about yet, right?
You're right. We need to talk about memory. It's the foundation upon which all learning is built.
It makes sense. Without a reliable memory, all the focus and motivation in the world won't do us much good.
Yeah.
It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it's just going to drain away.
Exactly. So how do we strengthen those memory muscles and make sure we're retaining all this valuable information? Well, the book dives deep into the science of memory, explaining how it works, and offering a ton of practical techniques for improving recall. And it all starts with a simple mnemonic device. MOM.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What does MOM stand for?
MOM stands for Motivation, Observation, and Mechanics.
Okay, so let's unpack each of those. We've already talked about motivation, the importance of having a strong why for wanting to learn something. So how does that tie into memory?
Well, motivation is crucial for memory because it activates the reward centers in our brain, making us more likely to pay attention and encode information deeply.
Okay.
When we're genuinely interested in something, our brains are naturally more engaged and receptive.
It's like sending a signal to our brain saying, hey, this is important, pay attention.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next element, observation. This is about being fully present in the moment and paying attention to details.
Okay.
It's about engaging all of our senses to create a richer sensory experience that our brains can latch onto.
So it's not just passively absorbing information, it's about actively engaging with it,
Yeah.
using all of our senses to create a more vivid and memorable experience.
Right. And the final component, mechanics, refers to the actual techniques and strategies we use to encode and retrieve information.
Yeah.
And the book covers a wide range of these techniques, from simple mnemonic devices to more elaborate systems for memorizing large amounts of information.
Okay. I'm ready to delve into those memory mechanics.
Yeah.
What are some of the most effective techniques that stood out to you from the book?
One of the most powerful and versatile techniques is visualization. It's about creating vivid mental images that represent the information we're trying to remember.
I love visualization. Such an effective way to make information more engaging and memorable.
It is. And the book provides a great example of how to use visualization to memorize a list of random words.
Oh, yeah.
The idea is to create a story that connects those words in a humorous and unexpected way, almost like a mental movie.
So instead of trying to brute force memorize the words, you create a mental picture that brings them to life.
Exactly. And by engaging our imagination and emotions, we make the information more meaningful and memorable. It's like turning data into a captivating story that our brains can easily recall.
I love that idea. It's like the difference between reading a dry textbook and watching a thrilling movie. The story format just sticks with us so much better.
That's a great analogy. And this principle applies to any type of information, not just lists of words. Whether you're trying to remember historical dates, scientific concepts, or complex arguments, finding a way to weave them into a story can dramatically improve your recall.
Okay, so if I'm trying to memorize the different parts of the brain for an anatomy exam, I could create a story about a group of quirky characters who live in different neighborhoods of the brain, interacting in humorous ways.
That's a great idea. And by personalizing the information and making it relatable to your own experiences, you're creating even stronger neural connections. That will make it easier to retrieve that information later on.
It's like turning the brain into a mental theme park, where each ride represents a different concept. But what about information that's inherently boring or difficult to visualize, like numbers or formulas? Are there techniques for those types of information?
Absolutely. The book covers a variety of mnemonic devices specifically designed for memorizing numbers, names, and even foreign languages.
Cool.
One technique is called the PEG system, where you create a mental list of images that represent the numbers from 1 to 10.
So instead of trying to remember the number 3 as an abstract symbol, I could visualize it as a tree,
Mm.
something concrete and easy to imagine.
Exactly. And then you can use those PEG images to create associations with other information you need to remember.
Okay.
For example, if you need to remember that the Battle of Hastings took place in 1066, you could visualize a knight representing 1066 standing next to a tree representing 3.
It's like creating a mental filing system, where each piece of information has a specific and memorable location.
Right. And by practicing these techniques, we can dramatically expand our memory capacity and make learning more efficient and enjoyable.
Okay, so we've covered the three components of MOM: motivation, observation, and mechanics. Are there any other memory hacks that stood out to you for the book?
One that's particularly effective for long-term retention is spaced repetition.
Okay, tell me more about spaced repetition. What is it, and why is it so effective?
Spaced repetition is basically a technique for reviewing information at increasingly longer intervals.
Okay.
It takes advantage of the fact that our brains are more likely to remember something if we're exposed to it multiple times over a period of time, rather than all at once.
So instead of cramming all at once and then forgetting everything a few days later, we're strategically spacing out our review sessions to maximize retention.
Exactly. And there are algorithms and apps that can help you determine the optimal spacing intervals. But the basic principle is to review information shortly after you first learn it, then again a day or two later, then again a week later, and so on.
It's like creating a workout schedule for our memory muscles, gradually increasing the intensity and duration of our review sessions.
That's a great way to put it. And research has shown that spaced repetition can significantly improve long-term recall, making it a highly effective strategy for learning anything, from vocabulary words and historical facts to complex concepts.
Okay, so we've got visualization, mnemonic devices, and spaced.
Repetition in our memory toolbox. What else can we add? Well, since we're talking about maximizing learning efficiency, we should definitely discuss accelerated reading techniques.
Yes. Speed reading, the holy grail of knowledge acquisition. The book actually opens with a funny anecdote, where the author describes unintentionally reading aloud much faster than his classmates when he was younger.
That's right. He was so absorbed in the material that he didn't even realize he was reading at an accelerated pace. And it really highlights the potential of speed reading to not only, enhance our reading speed, but also to improve our comprehension and engagement.
But isn't speed reading just skimming? Don't you miss out on details if you're trying to read so fast?
That's a common misconception. Speed reading isn't about skipping words or sacrificing comprehension.
Okay.
It's about training your eyes and your brain to process information more efficiently.
So it's like upgrading your mental software for reading.
Exactly, and the book identifies 3 common barriers to speed reading: regression, subvocalization, and a lack of pacing.
Okay, let's break those down. Regression, we already talked about that earlier. It's that habit of rereading words or phrases right.
That's right, and it's a major speed bump when it comes to efficient reading. Speed reading techniques aim to help you overcome regression by training your eyes to move smoothly across the page without backtracking.
And what about subvocalization? Is that like talking to yourself while you read?
Essentially, yes. It's that inner voice that reads along with you even if you're not moving your lips. And while subvocalization can be helpful for comprehension, it also limits our reading speed because we're bound by the pace of our inner voice.
So speed reading techniques help us quiet that inner voice and process information more visually.
Exactly. It's about shifting from auditory processing to visual processing, which allows us to take in larger chunks of information at a time.
It's like expanding our mental field of vision for reading.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, there's pacing, which refers to the speed at which we move our eyes across the page. Speed reading techniques often involve using a pacer, like a finger or a pen, to guide our eyes and gradually increase our reading rate.
So it's like setting a metronome for our eyes, helping them move at a consistent and accelerated pace. But does speed reading really work? Can you truly read faster and still understand what you're reading?
Well, the book presents evidence that it does. It cites studies showing that people can double or even triple their reading speed with proper training, while maintaining or even improving their comprehension.
Wow, that's impressive. It's like unlocking a superpower for knowledge acquisition. But I'm guessing it takes practice. You can't just suddenly become a speed reader overnight.
You're right. It takes time and effort to develop those skills, but the book offers practical exercises and techniques that can help you gradually increase your reading speed and efficiency.
Okay, I'm definitely going to have to try some of these techniques. But before we get carried away with speed reading, I want to shift gears and talk about another aspect of becoming a limitless learner. That really caught my attention, this idea of expanding our thinking.
You're referring to breaking free from those ingrained patterns and exploring new perspectives, right?
Exactly. We've talked about upgrading our mental hardware and software, but now it's time to broaden those mental horizons. And the book introduces this intriguing concept called thinking hats.
Ah, yes, the 6 thinking hats. It's a powerful framework developed by Edward de Bono for approaching problems and challenges from multiple angles. It encourages us to think more creatively and comprehensively.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these thinking hats and how they work.
So each hat represents a different mode of thinking. There's the white hat, which focuses on facts and information. The yellow hat, which explores positive and optimistic perspectives. The black hat, which analyzes risks and potential problems.
I see the pattern here. So it's like having a team of mental advisors, each with a different specialty, that we can consult depending on the situation.
That's a great way to put it. By consciously putting on these different hats, we can step outside of our habitual thinking patterns and approach challenges in a more creative and comprehensive way.
So if I'm facing a difficult decision, I could put on the white hat to gather all the relevant information, then switch to the yellow hat to explore the potential benefits, then try on the black hat to assess the risks, and so on.
Exactly. By considering the problem from these various perspectives, you're more likely to make a well-informed and balanced decision. It's like having a mental brainstorming session, generating a wider range of ideas and solutions.
It's like expanding our mental bandwidth for problem solving. But I'm curious, what about those times when we get stuck in a particular mode of thinking? Like, what if I'm naturally a pessimist and I struggle to see the positive side of things? Can these thinking hats really help me shift my perspective?
That's where the power of conscious effort comes in. By intentionally choosing to put on a different hat, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, we can challenge those habitual thinking patterns and expand our mental flexibility.
So it's about training our brains to be more adaptable and open-minded, even if it goes against our natural inclinations.
Exactly. And the more we practice using these different thinking hats, the more natural it becomes to access those different modes of thinking. It's like building mental pathways for creativity and innovation.
It's like creating a mental gym for our thinking muscles. But we've been focusing a lot on individual learning. What about the bigger picture? How can we apply these principles to address global challenges and create a more limitless future for everyone?
That's a great question. And it leads us to the final concept I want to highlight from the book, exponential thinking.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not entirely sure I understand what it means. Is it just thinking really, really hard?
It definitely involves pushing the boundaries of our thinking, but it's more than just thinking hard. Exponential thinking is about breaking free from linear thinking patterns, those limited step-by-step approaches, and embracing the power of rapid and accelerating progress. It's about thinking bigger and bolder.
Okay, give me an example. What does exponential thinking look like in action?
Well, the book highlights Peter Thiel's strategic takedown of Gawker as a prime example. He carefully planned his actions over 10 years, demonstrating a concept called second-order thinking. It's about thinking beyond the immediate consequences of our actions and anticipating the ripple effects they'll have over time.
So it's not just about solving problems in the moment, but creating solutions that have a lasting and transformative impact. Ripples that extend far beyond the initial action.
Exactly. Exponential thinking challenges us to identify the root causes of problems and develop solutions that address those core issues, rather than just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
It's like being a mental architect, designing solutions that are not only effective in the present, but also sustainable and scalable for the future.
That's a great analogy. And the book outlines 4 key steps for putting exponential thinking into practice.
Okay, I'm ready to activate my exponential thinking engine. What are the 4 steps?
The first step is to identify the real problem, which often involves digging deeper than what's immediately apparent.
Right.
So you see, the problems we perceive are often just symptoms of a more profound underlying issue.
I see.
So we have to ask why multiple times to get to the heart of the matter.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion to get to the core.
Exactly, once you've identified the root of the problem. The second step is to posit a new approach.
Okay.
This involves challenging assumptions and exploring alternative perspectives. It's about asking what-if questions to break free from conventional thinking and open up new possibilities.
So instead of accepting the status quo, we're actively seeking out new and innovative ways of approaching the problem. We're asking, what if there's a better way?
Right. And once we've formulated some potential solutions, the third step is to do the research.
Okay.
This involves gathering information, exploring different possibilities, and importantly, challenging our own biases.
So it's about being a mental detective, gathering evidence from diverse sources, and objectively analyzing the situation before jumping to conclusions.
Precisely. And the final step is to extrapolate. This involves taking what we've learned and projecting it into the future.
Okay.
It's about envisioning the potential impact of our solutions and imagining the possibilities that emerge when we embrace exponential growth.
It's like becoming a mental futurist,
Ugh.
painting a picture of a world where our solutions have created positive and lasting change. But how do we know if we're thinking exponentially? What are the signs?
Well, the book suggests that exponential thinkers tend to be incredibly curious. They're constantly questioning assumptions, connecting seemingly disparate ideas. And importantly, they maintain a sense of optimism about the future.
So it's about cultivating a mindset of possibility, believing that we can create a better future through innovative thinking and bold action.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that exponential thinking isn't just for entrepreneurs or inventors. It's a mindset that can benefit anyone regardless of their field or profession.
So if I'm struggling with a problem at work, I could apply exponential thinking to identify the root causes, brainstorm creative solutions, and envision a future where the problem is solved in a way that benefits everyone involved.
Absolutely. Or if you're feeling stuck in a rut in your personal life, exponential thinking can help you identify limiting beliefs, explore new possibilities, and envision a future where you're living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
It's like harnessing the power of our minds to create a more limitless future for ourselves and the world around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from those supervillains of learning to the power of exponential thinking. It's been an incredible journey through the landscape of the mind, exploring the potential that lies within each of us.
It has. And I think it's important to remember that all of these tools and techniques are meant to be used in service of a larger purpose. You see, learning isn't just about accumulating knowledge for its own sake. It's about empowering ourselves to live more fulfilling, impactful lives.
It's about becoming the heroes of our own stories, using our knowledge and skills to make a difference in the world.
Exactly. And that leads us to our final challenge for you. Now that you have this incredible toolkit for limitless learning, what are you going to do with it?
What new skill are you going to master? What problem are you going to solve? What impact are you going to make on the world?
Think about a goal that's been lingering in the back of your mind. Something you've always wanted to achieve, but maybe felt intimidated by. Maybe it's learning a new language, starting a business, writing a book, or even just improving your communication skills.
Whatever it is, choose one goal and commit to taking one small step toward it today. Remember those small, simple steps and the power of the Zeigarnik effect.
Break down that goal into manageable chunks and start creating those open loops in your mind. Use the techniques we've discussed today to fuel your motivation, sharpen your focus, and strengthen your memory.
Embrace the power of visualization. Create memorable stories, practice spaced repetition, and experiment with speed reading.
And most importantly, believe in yourself. Remember that you have the capacity to learn and grow far beyond what you might currently imagine.
So go out there and become the limitless learner you were always meant to be. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, challenging yourself, and unlocking your extraordinary potential.
Happy learning.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. We're wrapping up our exploration of limitless learning, and it's been quite the journey so far, hasn't it?
It really has. We've covered so much ground. from conquering those digital villains to harnessing the power of exponential thinking.
Exactly. And now I think it's time to bring all these ideas together and see how they can really empower us to achieve our goals and make a real impact.
Yeah, I agree. You know those supervillains we talked about earlier? The Digital Deluge, Digital Dementia, and Digital Deduction.
Oh yeah, those guys.
Well, they're not just abstract concepts, they're forces that are actively shaping our world.
That's true.
But by understanding how they operate, we can develop strategies to overcome them and actually use technology for good.
It's like turning those villains into allies, using their power for positive change instead of letting them hold us back.
Exactly, and that's where the power of a growth mindset comes in. Remember Carol Greider, the Nobel Prize winner who overcame dyslexia?
Yeah, what an incredible story.
She's a perfect example of how our potential isn't fixed or predetermined. We can always learn and grow, even when faced with those seemingly insurmountable challenges.
It's a reminder that with the right mindset and that unwavering motivation, we can achieve anything we set our minds to. Speaking of motivation, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on finding that why, that driving force that keeps us going even when things get tough.
Finding your why is essential for long-term success. And it's not just about setting goals, it's about connecting those goals to something deeper, to your values and your passions.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, think about what truly matters to you. What impact do you want to have on the world? What legacy do you want to leave behind?
It's about aligning your actions with your core beliefs, creating a sense of purpose that fuels your motivation and keeps you moving forward, even when you're faced with setbacks.
Exactly, and once you've identified your why, it's time to put all those amazing tools and techniques we've discussed into action.
Right. Remember those small, simple steps.
Start with just one tiny action, something that moves you closer to your goal, and then use the power of the Zeigarnik effect to keep that momentum going.
It's about building those positive feedback loops, one small win at a time,
Right.
until those small wins become big transformations.
Precisely. And don't forget about the importance of creating that brain-boosting lifestyle.
Yeah.
Prioritizing sleep, fueling your body with nutritious foods, and managing stress levels. These are all essential for optimal cognitive function.
It's like creating a supportive environment for your brain to thrive,
Yeah.
giving it the resources it needs to perform at its best.
Exactly. And remember, learning isn't a solo mission. Connect with other passionate learners. Find mentors who inspire you. And share your knowledge with others. The more we learn and grow together, the more we can create a world where limitless learning is accessible to everyone.
That's a beautiful vision. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought-provoking question you'd like to leave our listeners with?
That's a good one. I'd ask them this. What if you embrace the idea that you are capable of far more than you currently believe? What if you challenged yourself to step outside of your comfort zone and explore the uncharted territories of your mind? What if you committed to becoming a lifelong learner, constantly seeking new knowledge, expanding your horizons, and using your unique talents to make a positive impact on the world?
Wow, that's a powerful challenge. And I think it perfectly encapsulates the essence of limitless learning. It's about recognizing our inherent potential, embracing a growth mindset, and using the tools and techniques we've explored today to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life for ourselves and for others.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure diving deep into these concepts with you.
Likewise, the feeling is mutual.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to embark on your own journey of limitless learning. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. That way you won't miss any of our updates. Also, if you think this video could help others, please share it with them. Thanks for watching and for your support.